Hello, everyone, and welcome to the AngeloStrains and Nedaj Productions podcast. This is episode 3, and today's topic is Stoicism, or basically my history in Stoicism and my experiences of Stoicism. I'm not exactly fully mastered it yet, but I'd like to say I'm getting better at it, improving. So yeah, I know I'm pretty much getting into the heavy topics straightforwardly and right off the bat. The last two topics were pretty light, and all of a sudden, oh damn, Stoicism, deep stuff. Well, for those of you who are pretty new to the word Stoicism, the best way I can really put it in my experience is it's basically the act of prioritizing rational and logical thinking before emotional impulses, logical behavior as well. So essentially, it's to basically assess your situations clearly as if you were seeing your emotions from an objective view. None of your decisions are going to be influenced uncontrollable emotional impulses, basically. So to give it more sort of a perspective, whenever you get really mad or frustrated and you lash out and destroy a lot of things in your path, your actions echo long term. And essentially what you did was commit actions based on the emotions you were feeling at the time, without any thought of the consequences that would occur long term. So what Stoicism does is avoid basically that entire situation. Like I said before, Stoicism, from what I know, is looking at your emotions from an external point of view instead of actually being invested inside the emotion. When you're invested in the emotion, you don't really see the emotion for what it is. It feels big, it feels like it matters, and it feels, at the moment, it feels like the whole world to you. But then in an external view, you see the emotion for what it is. And when you look at something from an objective view, you can see the whole picture and how insignificant it really is in the long run, or at least you decide how insignificant or significant it is with the proper thought. So whenever you feel frustrated, angry, sad, and you're about to make decisions based on those emotions, Stoicism basically tells you to look at those emotions from an outside perspective, assess if it's worth it in the long run, and basically replace it with a more rational decision. And as you practice Stoicism more and more, you become immune to impulsive decisions. You're able to start to do things without being reactive to the negative emotions that would typically hinder and cloud your mind to make decisions that aren't worth it. So I believe that the mastery of Stoicism, remaining stoic, and the act of letting your emotions pass by like a cloud moving in the sky can really improve life in all aspects, but especially if you're driven, ambitious, and have a relentless work ethic, because being stoic also allows you to do work despite feeling lazy or not motivated. But then again, it also leads to discipline, which is another huge topic in itself. I believe in order to master Stoicism as a whole, you need a degree of discipline, which is why I believe mastering Stoicism is extremely difficult, especially in my experience. It was pretty difficult for me because my whole life growing up, I basically had everything. I was pretty spoiled as a kid and would often throw tantrums if I didn't get a certain toy or video game. And it has lasting effects and consequences when you grow up spoiled. And as an adult, it becomes harder and harder to basically undo all of that, especially when the real world hits you with a big, huge reality check. So the more spoiled you are as a kid, the harder it is to undo all that ego, entitlement, stubbornness, and frustration, and all that, etc. The even more lasting effects of not being able to adapt to the reality of the world can lead to depression and people taking pills and all that stuff. Because they weren't really trained at a young age to realize that the universe is indifferent to their needs and feelings. In the world, especially as a man, you have to work insanely hard to get something. Nothing will ever come to you if you do not know how to work hard and smart to get it. It's all about adapting, really. And if you're too invested in your emotions in an unproductive way, it can hinder you in your goals and duties, ambitions, and basically life in general. For me growing up, spoiled and then having an entire world piled down at me once I was an adult was pretty traumatic. It was a pretty traumatic experience. And the consequences of that was I was slow to mature, I was emotionally impulsive, unpredictable. I refused to take accountability for my actions and blamed the world, which was irresponsible and destructive to all those around me. I basically had to learn through a series of trauma and first-hand experiences on how tough the world is. And like I said, because of my late blooming and long overdue adaptation skills, I should have learned basically when I was a kid. It led to depression, anxiety, and luckily I didn't go as far as to having to take medication. But there are some people that eventually take medication to help cope with those stemming problems. Their mind is not developed, not strong enough as it should be because, they've been in a nurtured environment. They end up growing emotionally weak, and that can cause a lot of distancing from those they love. Now, some of you might be thinking, so Stoicism is basically bottling up your emotions until you explode? Well, to me, that's a pretty common misunderstanding about how people new to Stoicism would think about it. But in my opinion, that's not really what Stoicism is about. I believe Stoicism gives insight into healthier outlets for manifesting emotions because if you already are used to having a work ethic and your ability to recognize opportunity is not clouded by your emotions due to practicing Stoicism, you'll be able to explore more options of being productive and whatever excess emotion still escapes you. It can ultimately be manifested into a productive activity. If you're still feeling bits of anger, despite not giving into it, you go to the gym, lift heavy weights aggressively. It helps. Let's say you're a musician. You had a heavy day at work, and you didn't react to it at all. If you feel some sort of excess sadness on the side because you're not entirely clouded by that sadness due to being stoic, you could think clearly of productive ways to turn that ghost sadness into something beautiful. You experience the sadness without letting it experience you, and you can create beautiful music without losing yourself to the symptoms of sadness. Stoicism is good for letting go and moving forward. Let's say the reason why you were angry at work is because your coworker frustrated you. After work, there's no point in focusing in the past. Chances are that person that upset you has moved on too, if that guy has control of his emotions as well, but that's just an assumption. The world isn't that easy, which is all the more reason practicing being stoic would help. Overall, I believe that Stoicism is a great attribute for emotional maturity and helpful for moving past inconvenient social situations. I believe that people who recognize this type of behavior to remain stoic and keep moving forward from a situation where a normal guy would break down would basically attract people looking up to you. They'll be able to rely and trust you because they've seen what you're like under pressure. You don't break down. You don't stop and complain. You don't blame others. It's total accountability and adapting based on your environment to get the work done and move forward to the next task. It's literally a display of competence as people can see that you're capable of making rational decisions without letting the environment sway you around. So that's my overall talk about Stoicism. I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode. Hopefully I gave you some insight. Until then, I'll see you in the next video.